Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. In today's set of videos, we're going to be having a look at the sales which have come along. The summer sales that are happening in June, and in this video we'll be having a look at the starter packs, and then I'll do another video which has a look at all the other packs which are on sale. I'm not going to split them up into their individual nations this time. It takes more effort doing that, and if I'm honest with you right now, it's basically birthday, so I'm just going to go and enjoy that. And because we're going to be actually doing the Twitch drops on my actual birthday, so today going to a concert, going to have some food and all that. So a few things before we get started into this. First one, the packs. When it comes to the US Pacific pack and also the Japanese Pacific pack, they're both being removed. If you haven't got them, make sure to pick them up so you can get access to some really cool vehicles, which I don't know if they'll come back in the future. Stuff like the good old A6M5 Co. This vehicle right here, been absolutely busted for the longest time. Same, you have the YP38 over in the American side of things. So make sure to pick up those packs if you haven't before. Easily a best addition, and also they are available on Humble Bundle, weirdly enough, so we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, this video we'll be looking at the starter packs, and the other one we'll be looking at the other stuff. At the same time, the starter packs are always some of the best, like most efficient uses of your money, and also can help you get into a new tag tree. So always focus on that, and let's get into it. The first set of vehicles is for America, and it is the M3A1 USMC, and also Rasmussen's P36A. Now, the thing I like about starter packs is usually if the vehicles are around the same BR, so therefore you can kind of run them together in ground and also some other areas. But unfortunately, these two are very different BRs, mainly because of the strength of the M3A1 USMC. This vehicle has a stabilizer and also the 37mm, which pretty much means you can always get the first shot off in an engagement, and also has a lot of mobility on the chassis as well. Doesn't have a lot of armor, but if you're always in a situation to get the first shot off, then you're going to do pretty well. The only issue with this vehicle is it's a rank 1 instead of a rank 2, so it doesn't get access to scouting, but you can use it to get access to the very powerful 2.7 lineup with the Lee, the M5, and also, of course, the M16. There's some really nice premiums you can throw in that lineup as well at some point, but it could just get you past this little area. It's a fantastic vehicle, super fun to play, highly recommend it. The Rasmussen, though, P36... not as much. This one struggles in terms of firepower and also engine performance as well. It's just not a vehicle which has a lot going for it. I suppose if you play arcade, you can throw it in with a ton of different vehicles because America is pretty stacked at the lower tiers, and then just kind of have a little bit of fun with it. But at least for me, I don't see it as like a really great vehicle. It's generally one which has its issues in pretty much every way, and when I compare it to a lot of the other starter vehicles, it's just not very good. So in this pack, the M3, very nice. The Rasmussen's, not great. It's not good. For Germany, you have two pretty decent vehicles, one which just recently went up in BR, which is this SD KFC 140/1. This vehicle, at rank 1, Battle Rating 2.0, has access to the 20mm KWK38, and the reason why it went up is because of its high mobility and also the HVAP round. The HVAP round with 48mm of pen at max can pretty much just go around and kill the thing and then move on. You can also use it as an AA. It's one of those vehicles that's very multi-role and generally does pretty well. The 2.0 area for Germany, like they upped a lot of BRs recently, or sorry, a lot of specific vehicles because of the autocannons. They're just really good. So the good old SDKFC 141 is no different, but you still have a lineup around it with stuff like the Panzer IV F1 and Panzer IV-E plus planes. So this is a super fun vehicle, really nice one to go back to if you've been, you know, grinding out a lot of stuff and, you know, it's not too fun. And the other thing, with the pages of history events, there's a lot of them which are more early war or mid-war, and a lot of like earlier German vehicles that are used, so you can slot this into the lineup as well. The plane is the Ju-87R2. This is the Libya variant. It's exactly the same as the one in the tech tree, apart from it has a really nice camo. This is very much more tailored to ground players. So as an air player, if you're looking for an early aviation pickup, you're probably looking premium-wise at different vehicles, probably Flegels if it's available, or maybe even one of these, which are around here, or even the P-47 when it's on sale, or the TAR 154. For ground, if you're more interested in German ground, this is a very good pickup because it pretty much just gives you access to a 1,000-kilo bomb. So even if you miss by a great distance, you will still be able to knock out whatever you're trying to knock out. It isn't good at defending itself. It's not got bad flight characteristics. What this is just a 1,000-kilo bomb. That's it. So if you want to have a bit of fun at low tier and be able to donk a bunch of people with the bomb, then it can work incredibly well. But at the same time, it's not something which is gonna, go nuts. For USSR, you have the T126 and also Zukovsky's I-153M62. I thought they were actually going to change this stuff, but I suppose it was just about a starter vehicle, like when you actually unlock the thing. They brought in Krasnoludsky's I-15 BIS for the 250G instead of Zukovsky's, but I'm guessing that was just as like a starter instead of like an actual pack itself, because Zukovsky's is still very powerful. The T126 though is a thick boy T50, which means it has way more angled armor and also has the 45mm 20k cannon. Now this thing used to be super powerful when it was at 2.7. It has the scouting, it has the good gun, and once again it has this angled armor, which means wherever you get shot, it has a chance of just ricocheting. It also has the same amount of armor, pretty much every area around it, so it's just kind of good at ricocheting shots if people aren't firing stuff like heat. The problem with it though is its BR. The 2.7 BR was super fun. You had the T-50, you could throw in some of these tank destroyers, the BTR-152, and all of these things. But at 3.0, with the T-126, what do you have? You have the ZIS-12 94km, and that's pretty much it. So it's a vehicle which is not in a great place. It's just one of those which is kind of on by itself. Now, can it carry by itself? Yeah, of course. If it gets in an up tier, how could it do? It can also do really well. Because even though you have, all of the, even though you have with the T126, you have a few issues with the turret rotation and stuff like that, you can always just scout things, right? Which a lot of these other vehicles you can't do because they're rank 1s. But it just kind of sucks. I'm kind of surprised they haven't either maneuvered this thing, especially if this is designed for a starter player, because you kind of want to push them towards lineups and things, and as they talked about in January or so, that's, that was one of the main goals of the stuff, but it just... yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't really fit the motto of what they have. Then Zukovsky's I-153 is a really fun biplane. This one is great in pretty much every game mode you can play it in. It has the 47.62 chassis and is a deadly turn fighter. You do actually have some little secondaries now, which is kind of cool. And obviously the tracer belts do a lot of damage for Zukovsky's, but overall it's just a plane which is incredibly maneuverable, and in arcade and realistic can just do a ton of stuff and can kind of just control the battlefield. It's also a decent plane to learn how to defensively fly, just because, it's super maneuverable, but won't give you probably the best idea of how stuff like that goes in the future. As you go like higher in the tech trees, I think something like a BF-109 E1 is probably better at that. For Britain, you have two very good vehicles, which once again don't really work together, because when you're trying to set up lineups, especially for ground, one of the major things is, since you're always going to be forced to spawn in a ground vehicle and not necessarily in a air vehicle, you always want your ground vehicles to be either the highest BR or equal with the aviation that's around, and that's not what these two vehicles are. So you got the Crusader the Saint. This is a fantastic light vehicle, very mobile, gun is punchy, great reload on the gun, and also has very good gun depression, meaning that you can get to places and be able to use them to your advantage. Also has the vertical stab and a ridiculously good turret rotation speed, a lot better than a bunch of other vehicles I've been using recently. It's a lot higher BRs. Its major issue is it's not very tanky and also doesn't really reverse very well, but it's a light vehicle, so the tankiness isn't too much of an issue. And the reverse, yep, that can definitely be a problem, especially if you're a new player. But one thing it does to combat this is it does actually have access to smoke grenades in the form of 26 of them. So you can just keep plonking them out of your turret over and over again and then eventually kind of scarper away. So the vehicle itself, for me, the Crusader the Saint, is fantastic. It's really fun, and also you have the standard tech tree one, you can run it with the Archer as well, and even the Sark for a little bit of mobility, plus the 3-inch and the Matilda, if you want more of the weaker vehicles at the BR. But yeah, it can work really, really well and be a great start to a tech tree. The Spitfire Mark IIA is an aerialistic beast. The only issue with this one is the fact that you've got to understand that you're using 7.7 Brownings and you're not using 20mm, so you have to get close to the targets within 300 to 400 meters. You can stay on them because you have, you know, the speed to be able to do it and also have the maneuverability. But also the engine, which is a fantastic engine at its BR, by the way. The Merlin good old 12 is very good, but it has one problem, and that problem is simple. It overheats. And if you're in extended battles, if you're fighting multiple people, this engine will overheat. So you got to be a little bit careful of that. Once you understand that, though, and once you kind of, you know, get into it and everything and understand that knocking the engine power back to like 80, 85 sometimes is a good idea, and then forcing a defensive flight because this thing is really good in the defensive, and then you just swap over onto the enemy, you can do a ton of damage, which is super good. So the Spitfire Mark IIA Venture is really nice as a vehicle. I highly recommend this one. It's just I wish these two vehicles like fit together better. They have very contrasting styles. Like this one, you know, is more designed for air and air arcade and air realistic, doesn't really work in ground, and this one obviously is just, you know, a very aggressive scout, which does incredibly well. The Japanese get the Chi-Hi and then also the Ki 44. So the Chi-Hi is one of those I used to enjoy quite a lot and still enjoy a decent amount, but also it's one which can be quite annoying. And the reason is because of its BR of 2.7. 2.7 itself as a BR actually fits pretty good for this thing. Once again, it has the vertical stabilizer like a lot of these premiums, and also has a pretty punchy 47mm. But unlike stuff like the Crusader, it doesn't have a lot of penetration on the round. So the penetration is the limiting factor, but if you penetrate, you do a ton of damage to vehicles, usually 1 or 2 shotting them. But at 2.7, you don't have scouting like stuff like the Crusader does, and what this means is you don't have that secondary role, so you are just there as a medium tank to be able to do medium tank things. So if you come up against KV-1s, for example, or you come up against T-34s, or even stuff like T-1260s, you're going to struggle, because actually penning those things with this gun can be pretty tough to do. So even though it has the really good gun depression, the good reload, and all of these things, it doesn't have a lot of armor, and also its gun, which kind of is one of those things you want to be good and want to do well, doesn't. It struggles, unfortunately, with that whole setup. So that's a problem. Hopefully, at some point, this thing can go down to 2-3 because of that, but even if it doesn't, you know, it still has a strong lineup around it, with the standard Chi-Hi as well, the Chi-Ha LG, and of course the M16 once again, works fantastically as a rank 2 to get into that rank 3, and a lot of early Japanese vehicles are super rough, by the way. So overall, you know, it's good for that. I just wish that with the vehicle, it was just a little bit better. Based around, well, how do I put this? It doesn't need to be better, it just needs better matchmaking. Does that make sense? Because the issue is not 2.7, it's 3.7 and sometimes 3.3. So it just needs a bit better matchmaking. Ki 44, on the other hand, insanely good vehicle. Like, there's so many early Japanese propeller aircraft which are absolutely nuts, and it was one of my favorite tech trees to grind through. You know, the Key 43, the Key 44, Key 61, J2s, A6s, all of them have their big bright spots, and the Key 44 is no different. Has a really nice engine on it. The good old Nakajima gives it a lot of power. If you compare that to the Spitfire one, it's pretty much a little bit higher. And then you also have these two 12.7mm HO-103s and two 77s. Not the best, but still has a lot of ammo and can do a lot of damage and does well in air and also ground. And since this is 2.7, you can run them together, which is just fantastic. Doesn't get access to secondaries, which can be annoying, but this plane is like a jack of all trades. It can climb high, it can dive, it can energy fight, and also it can defensively fly and also turn fight. So it's all more about, with this vehicle, how the enemy fights, and then from your point of view, you're able to, you know, fight on your terms, depending on what you want to do. So the Key 44 is fantastic, really fun to play in pretty much every game mode. Chi-He, not great. The Chinese get another Stuart. This is different from the M3A1 though. This is the M3A3, which means it's more of the wide angled armor. So it does have a better armored profile. Still has the 37mm M6 though, and does a lot of damage at 2.7 with it, with once again the vertical stab. Another thing, this thing gets the smokes, but the main one is it's rank 2. So being at rank 2, it gets scouting, and that means that even if you do get up beyond, you are able to be a use for your team. And with this gun, which is decently punchy, you're able to, you know, pen a lot of the sides of things, especially with the M51B1 round. You can see it here, and then you can just go around and just do a decent amount with it and just have a bit of fun. It's just one of those which works really well in my opinion, and it's one of those which, you know, I've used a lot for different decals or different challenges, and it's just worked fantastically good. The 2.7 lineup is pretty strong for a lot of nations, and nowadays non-existent for others. And you can see here with the Chinese, your 2.7 lineup is 2 other Stuarts plus your Stuart. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, the Stuart's a very good vehicle, and you can use it to get into that mid-echelons. So if you don't want to play a lot of the copy and paste stuff that China has, the M3A3 can be a good pickup to be able to do that, just like the M4A4 can be too, to get past or get through this area, and then move on to this, and then of course the more exotic stuff at rank 5. The H81A2, it's the good old, is it the Tomahawk or something like that? It's very similar to the Kitty Hawk, apart from it just feels a lot heavier when you fly it. It has access to 4 7.62mm, so in 2 in each wing, and then also 2 12.7. So the firepower bit isn't an issue. It just feels a little bit more sluggish, as if like I could do with like another like 100 horsepower, you know, in the engine, or I could do with just something, just giving it a little bit more of a kick, which would work pretty well for it. It does have secondary weapons though, so you can bring a 500 pounder, and since it's a 2.3, you can run it with the M3A3, and it just works perfectly as a support. The Chinese air tree is pretty boring, I'm not gonna lie. As somebody who's researched through a lot of it, super dull. Because a lot of it is just the same as what you see in other nations, even all the way up to here. You basically have to get to here, and even here there's still vehicles which are very similar to other ones, so you only have maybe like 10 actually interesting vehicles. The rest are just either variations or the same as like other ones. So for a star in the tech tree, for me, if you're a person who is trying to look to get into China, like I would say it's a decent idea to get this. Another thing as well is China is actually a really good starter nation. I know a lot of people say, oh, we'll just go play America, go play Germany, go play USSR. And yeah, that's fair. You know, all of them are really good. USSR teaches bad habits, but overall it's fine. But the Chinese have a great mix of pretty much everything. So for a new player, China can give you a lot, and it can give you a bunch of different playstyles, a bunch of different ways of playing, and you can kind of learn from China what you like and then move on to other nations and put it in. The H81 helps with that as well. Italy, for me, has two pretty over-BR'd vehicles for their starter pack. So you have the M14, 41, 47, 40. This is just a standard M14, which has access to, of course, the 47mm and a 13.2mm Breda machine gun, which is pretty much useless. It doesn't really matter. Like it hardly pens anything. This thing's a 2-3. Like it's not gonna really do anything. But also the gun itself, the standard one, also doesn't pen too much. And since even though they put up a lot of the baddies, like the good old the Sherman 105 and also the B1 and stuff like that, which has more armor, they slowly put them up in BR. Doesn't really matter. This vehicle will still face them and it won't be able to hurt them. Also, it doesn't have the greatest turret rotation speed. The armor's naff on it. It's slow, which is also another thing. Doesn't get scouting or anything like that, but does have decent gun depression and reload. But it just doesn't feel nice to play. It feels wonky, you know. I feel like it's just missing a lot of little things. Now you can run it with like the CM52, the Semaventes if you want a Death Wish, but once again, you know, at 2.7 you've got another Stuart, you've got an AB43, which is super fun. You've also got the M1542. Like, why would you want to play this 2-3 lineup when you have this beautiful, you know, set of vehicles which are just sat over here, which are going to be so much more fun to play? And that's the problem with this premium. Like, even though it has a lineup, the lineup's a dud compared to what else you can create. I'm very surprised they haven't switched this premium. It feels like one of the worst in the bunch. The Reggiani 2001 Gruppo 22 is a really fun aircraft. You know, there's no other way around it. The Italian air tech tree is fantastic. It's beautifully fun to play. There's a lot of great vehicles, super enjoyable overall. And the 2001, which, you know, you have the 2000s here, the 2002, and then the 2001s that are here. It's really nice, you know, and just like the rest of the Reggianis, super enjoyable. But the problem with it, and the problem that will always be, is it's just got no secondary ordnance, its engine likes to overheat, and also there's not really a great set of vehicles around its BR at 3.0. So in ground or even naval, you don't really have a lineup for it. You got the Panzer 3N, big whoop. And then in naval, you've got the MS-473, which is a very poor vehicle, and you can't really run it with these, but if you want, I suppose you can. So at least there's that. But yeah, it's a vehicle that has great performance. You can do pretty much whatever you want with it. The engine overheats, the guns are fine on it. It's just not really got a place in this like kind of tech tree, just like a lot of these other vehicles, which sucks because the Italian aviation tech tree is my favorite in the game, and I just wish more people would enjoy the vehicles. You know, the C202s, C200s, 205s, all the Reggianis, they're super fun. You know, there's a lot to them and a lot to enjoy, but unfortunately they just always get overlooked, and that sucks. For France, you have a pretty nice lineup. You got the B1 Ter and also the P40 F5 Lafayette. B1 Ter is a chunky boy, nowhere near as useful as it used to be. When they added Sweden, they added a lot of APDS at this tier, and also there's a lot more donkey machines that can just like kind of throw rounds through this stuff. Does have an additional crew member compared to the B1 BIS, and also additional armor, so it is better than the B1 BIS. But once it got its BR raised, because this thing used to be 2-3, there is still, you know, remnants of a lineup around it with the M3A3 and the Crusader, but it can't really, like, bully as much as it could do. So, for example, like the Crusader Mark II and the M3A3, I would take both of these vehicles over the B1 Ter. And the reason for this is just because it is, they are scouts and they're more mobile, they have good guns, you can kind of go around the enemy and, you know, have a bit of fun with it, and also, you're not just a massive target. So, for me, it's definitely the weakest of the bunch. It's still nice to be able to ricochet shots, even though they took away, you know, the RP and SL gain from it, but it's good, it's bullying in a down tier and everything else, it's very mediocre. The Lafayette is much better. This one is a very standard vehicle at this type of BR, the good old Kitty Hawk, and the Lafayette is just really balanced and nice to play. You know, 650 cal, so you always do a ton of damage. The other thing with it as well is it does have access to 1-500 and 2-100, so you can use it in ground and also naval, now that naval's around. And it does use like early war belts for the 50s, but still fine at this BR. You know, you tear enough stuff apart, and it can be used in most roles. And the main thing is it can be a good backup to that really good set of 2-7 vehicles, the M3A3 and the Crusader, with the B1 Terror in tow. So the French pack is like a bit of both, right? The Lafayette, fantastic, and also at the same time it gets you through the dross. That is the early aviation tech tree for the French, and as you can see, they've added a ton of EFS, and I just don't want to play them. Look, I just don't make me do it, you know what I mean? So it looks like, you know, we're gonna have a bunch of stuff with that going on, but yeah, the only parts of this area which are fun are the H75s and also the VG33. The rest is dross, and the Lafayette with its you know, its rewards on it makes it much easier to get through. Sweden is a tale of two halves. You have the SCR VM41 S1. This vehicle is a scout and does have access to scouting. It's at exactly the same BR as the S2, and they're pretty much exactly the same vehicle. Like, the S2 has slightly more hull armor, but that's really about it. And we're talking about 5mm, which when it's 20mm ain't gonna make a difference. The selling points of this vehicle are simple: fast reload, good gun depression, and also at the same time with this 37mm has access to APDS, which means it has a really high penning round at this BR. So it might not do the most, but since you have a really fast reload, you can bang, 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 and you just keep hitting the enemy over and over and over again and doing a bunch of damage to them, which is obviously very good. And the vehicle itself has scouting, so once again, if you get up BR'd, it doesn't matter. Like, you can just chill and scout at the back of the map or whatever and just move around. The only issue I have with this thing, it doesn't have access to smoke grenades or smoke in general, so it's quite hard to reposition compared to other stuff. So in my opinion, it's one of those which kind of sucks for that, but generally it's not too bad for that. So for me, good vehicle. It also has, you know, pretty decent lineup with the SCR VM41 S2. The Largo, once you get it spaded, is not bad. Both of these vehicles heavily depend on the APDS, so having a vehicle that already has it is pretty good. The Fokker D21 is just awful. Like, I don't know who decided that this thing was going to be like the starter vehicle. This thing is probably the worst vehicle in the world to pick to represent the Swedish like tech tree, just in general. It doesn't play like any of the other Swedish vehicles and is way too heavy and just doesn't feel great. Maybe in arcade it's wonderful, but in air realistic and, you know, in ground, it's awful. Like, it's so bad. And for some reason, there's just a bunch of weird premiums for the Swedish, which are just no good. And this is just another one. It has two Oerlikon FFs, which are low velocity 20mm, which is completely fine. Unless you want to, you know, destroy ground targets, then it's really bad. You have some 7.7s backing it up, which is completely fine. But this massively reminds me of a vehicle that used to be like the starter vehicle for the Japanese. I'm pretty sure it was like the Ki 27 Otsu Taichirai that you can see here. And the problem with it is it just doesn't have enough speed, and it doesn't have enough anything. You are just like wallowing around waiting for somebody to jump on you. And then you have like 1 or 2 good turns, and then after that, nothing. So you just get taken apart and blown away. And that is the problem with this machine. And unfortunately, a problem with a lot of other machines. It is stuck in doldrums. Like, it doesn't have it doesn't even have like the thing it's good at. Instead, it's just waiting for an enemy to screw up and then you kind of capitalize. And you don't want vehicles like that, you know, especially as a new player. As a new player, you want stuff which actually makes a bit more sense. The Swedish aviation tree is good, just like the ground tech tree. It's a fantastic one to get into, but I feel like there are better options than this Fokker. Overall, the starter packs, as I said, really good value. They're always good to pick up, even if, you know, the vehicles aren't the best. But hopefully this review has helped you, and as always, I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Millie Draper, Juan the Panda, Nick R. Cupila, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie B. Young, Peter Grayling, Jerry Provolt, Bareen, Alan Hacker, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, Derek R., and Lafouche for supporting the channel.